Once upon a time, I lived in a far-off land in Central Asia known as Uzbekistan. Today, we're going to take a look back at the former Soviet Republic. Hey folks, welcome to the Down the Road Travel Channel. My name is Will Van Winkle. Many years ago, on Thanksgiving Day, I landed in the former USSR. No turkey, no dressing, no pie. Lots of carrots, onions, and potatoes. The trip took about 40 hours of transit time because at the time there were no direct flights from the US. Now I've seen that Uzbek Air flies out of JFK. I'm not sure if this is a direct flight, but it no longer has to be cobbled together using partial legs and multiple airlines. Now, if you've taken that flight from JFK and you know if it's direct, let us know in the comments below, or if it has connecting stops, so that if anybody is interested in going to this fairly exotic land, they know the best route to take or the best way to get there. We arrived in the middle of the night on Turkish Air. Even though the German embassy had sent a driver, we had to make our way through hordes of taxi drivers. Now, at this time, it was common practice to slip some money into your passport to make sure customs and passport control went more smoothly. We did not do that. So they attempted to hold us, but once they saw the diplomatic card that we'd had, they let us through. My ex-wife was a German diplomat. We were there for her job. Now, we made it through the taxi drivers. Now, here they were more like Uber drivers because they're not official taxis. We made our way out of the horde into the embassy van and off to our hotel for the night. And I believe it was Hotel Uzbekistan, maybe Tashkent Hotel, for the first nights. And then when we left, we stayed at the time, it had just changed from the Sheraton and became the Boomi International. The next day, we moved to our temporary apartment right across the street from the German embassy. It was a typical Soviet block-style building which had yellow foam wallpaper inside. Now, to be fair, the wallpaper probably was white at one point, but had turned yellow from years of smoking inside. Kids, don't smoke. There was a milk lady that would come around pretty early in the morning, about between 4 and 6 a.m. every morning, yelling "Moloko," which is Russian for milk. And that was kind of the inflection that she had when she'd do it. And I wrote a song, and that's playing in the background right now. It's called Moloko. Street vendors would sell winter vegetables that were available at the time. Again, this is going to be carrots, onions, and potatoes, those root vegetables that the cold doesn't bother quite as much. My ex, being a vegetarian, made our first few months very difficult because we had missed an international order. I think the company was called Peter Yusensen. The German embassy would do that, and they would order canned goods and sodas and things that you couldn't necessarily get in Uzbekistan. Certain types of cheeses would be delivered, all kinds of fun little goodies. But we had just missed that, and the next one wasn't going to be for 3 months. The bazaar had very little because it's winter, and we didn't have a car yet anyway. And grocery stores would randomly have things in stock. Sometimes you could find a can of corn. Sometimes you wouldn't find anything. Sometimes you could find Coca-Cola. Sometimes you wouldn't find that. And there's an interesting story that goes with the shortage of Coca-Cola a little bit later on in the video, so keep watching. Because the stores had varying stocks, you would have to go to multiple places to find even the most basic things. Even tofu, you couldn't find in a grocery store. You would have to go to a Korean market where they made it fresh there, and it was actually pretty decent as far as tofu goes. Those of you who are not vegetarian who have had tofu know what I'm talking about. Those of you who are vegetarian that eat tofu, hey, I'm sorry for your luck. So again, we ate those carrots, onions, and potatoes for most meals. This lasted about 2 months. So you can imagine I was kind of getting a little bit tired of those staples. Now, having visited Germany, Poland, Italy, France, etc., I already felt that I might be immune to culture shock because nothing there really struck me. But upon arriving in Tashkent, the Uzbek capital, I learned what culture shock was. This is an ancient land, a former Soviet land, so very different than anything I had experienced in my life up to this point. Uzbekistan was settled in the 8th century BC, eventually becoming part of, if not the heart of, the Great Silk Road. fostering trade between Europe and Asia. By about the 7th century AD, it became an Islamic state, which it remains today, despite Soviet beliefs that religion was not useful to the people. In the 14th century, Samarkand was the capital. While living in Uzbekistan, we had the chance to visit Samarkand. It was amazing. I was awestruck by the ancient mosques and madrasas. The city itself is over 2,500 years old, and its bazaars and markets, amazingly crafted silk and ceramic wares, can still be found. The people were friendly and quite proud of their heritage, willing to share their culture with visitors. At this time, this was the oldest place that I have ever been. Driving back from Samarkand, we needed fuel. We are driving a diesel four-wheel drive. Don't worry, if you choose to visit the ancient city, you don't necessarily need any kind of special vehicle or equipment, at least when I lived there. Now, the roads may have gotten worse. They do have a lot of potholes, but there are roads, so it's not like you're driving on dirt and mud and fighting with the elements over that. So you still have the ability to get from place to place, even if you're just in a regular car. If you're driving a diesel, though, at this time at least, you were not likely to find any at regular fuel stations. Even if you found any of those, the common practice at the time was to flag down a delivery truck, 18-wheeler or something like that, negotiate a price, and siphon enough fuel from their tank into yours to get you to a truck refilling station. They'll likely lead you there if you ask them. The problem here is English and or Russian were not likely to be of any help because outside of Tashkent, most of the locals spoke Uzbek, which is very similar to, say, Turkish. So if you have an Uzbek-speaking friend, try to get them to go along with you. They will be very helpful in negotiating those situations when you are outside of the capital, which is now Tashkent. By now, we had our permanent housing. We're set up in the capital city, which I think Tashkent became the capital in the 19th century when the Russian Empire abandoned, or absorbed rather, most of Central Asia. That's when the Soviet Union was being created. In Uzbekistan, we had our own set of unique experiences, from boiling toilets to earthquakes. Now I'll explain the toilet situation. Apparently, in the construction of the house where we lived, some of the water lines had been reversed. And the cold water line that should have fed the half bath was a hot water line. Water heaters didn't have temperature regulators, so it didn't always happen, but one evening it was running hot. A friend of ours from the Peace Corps went into the half bath, used the restroom, came out and said, "Hey, did you know your toilet's boiling over?" I guess it got nicely disinfected that night is the only thing I can really say about that. We were also there on 9/11. 2000. Upon arriving at a housewarming party for I want to say it was a German military attaché. I could be wrong on that. It's been so long. I don't really know whose house it was, but they had just gotten there. Upon arriving, everybody began offering me condolences. "Oh, I'm so sorry. How are you?" Things like that. I'm like, I'm sitting here oblivious. I'm fine. Being so many hours ahead of New York, we were in the car when the planes hit. And as surreal as the moment was, my daughter's first birthday party was in no way a party. The Peace Corps headquarters was in one of the towers. Many of our friends were Peace Corps, and they could not get in touch with friends, family, and coworkers who were in New York at the time. Many did actually die. With Uzbekistan being a Muslim country, Tashkent being a mere 2.5 hours from Kandahar, Afghanistan, and under pressure from parents, the Peace Corps announced that day that they were pulling out of Uzbekistan. Some of our friends found positions with various UN offices. Most were sent home. It was a very interesting time. Most people were affected by 9/11, some more than others, and you could really see who was more affected. And then some did lose friends, some did lose family, some actually lost entire department of coworkers. So it was a rough time. Shortly after that, bombing began on Afghanistan. They were using something called bunker busters. So it was theorized that the bombs dropped on the fault lines had activated earthquakes And this was felt from India all the way to Uzbekistan. Some were actually felt all the way up into Turkey, which is another 5-hour flight from Uzbekistan. In fact, it was here that I experienced my first earthquake, with a major earthquake destroying much of the old city of Tashkent in 1966. Earthquakes were not to be taken lightly here. But I will admit, when it hit, I was on the couch that backed up to the radiator heating and thought we were having problems with the hot water again, until I noticed that the dining room lamp was swinging. So we had a very, very sturdy dining room table. So when I noticed things shaking, the next tremor came, I dove under the table. So just imagine, a boy from Texas never experienced an earthquake in his life hiding under a table because the ground is shaking. We did experience several small earthquakes while there, and everyone was just after some of those bunker busters had been dropped. Conspiracy theory or not, I personally believe those bombs had something to do with all those earthquakes at the time. In a time where Americans were learning to pay bills online rather than drop checks in the mail, the Uzbek trash and water bills were collected at your door, and you had to go to the offices to pay electric and phone bills. Different prices existed for foreigners versus locals, so as a diplomatic family, we were required to hire locals for, say, cleaning staff, groundkeepers, drivers, something like that. And this was to help stimulate the Uzbek economy. So, because there were different prices, we decided we would pay the bills, have our staff go pay the bills. Incidentally, one time someone stole a phone wiring for landlines in our neighborhood. I think they were trying to get the copper. So we're located within sight of Oili Majlis, which I'm not sure I pronounced the first word right, and never have been sure if that was correct. But that's the Uzbek parliament. So they're stealing copper lines right across from where the government meets. So they really didn't care. When the lines were replaced, they were reversed. So instead of this, they did this. We got somebody else's phone line, and that's directed to our house. Lots of calls from men, fairly late in the evening, and we couldn't understand them because we didn't really speak Russian that well. I still only speak about a supermarket Russian. I'm not going to starve, but I'm not going to get into a good conversation. One day we had our English-speaking housekeeper talk to one of these men. Turns out we now had the phone line of a local hooker, and it took months to correct. So I can't help but wonder how much business this lady lost and how disappointed some of these men were. We had rolling power outages throughout the time that we lived there. So generators were hooked up to the house, to embassy houses by the embassy, provided by the embassy. But it was a diesel generator, so it smelled horrible. It was right underneath the house. It let fumes into the house. So we always waited as long as we could before firing the loud beast up to avoid creating those fumes as much as possible. Now we're going to get into the Coke story. 1 year, Coca-Cola was shut down. This launched the German and US embassy and honorary British embassies into a frenzy because, from what I heard, and again, this is only rumors, there's nothing to substantiate this, the Uzbek head of Coke was married to the Uzbek president's daughter at the time. He decided when he went in for a seminar to New York that he wanted to stay in the States and leave his wife. So this prompted quick government response. Rumor has it that multiple international higher-ups in Coca-Cola that were living in Uzbekistan as representatives were arrested. In Uzbekistan at the time, people that got arrested tended to not be seen again. I don't have all the details. A lot of this was very secret, and they were trying to avoid international incidents because, as another rumor goes, to launch those airstrikes on Afghanistan, they were using Uzbek airstrips. So cooperation was there, and they were trying to work things out, and I don't have all the details, so I can't go in much further, but we could not buy Coke in Uzbekistan. We had to go to Kazakhstan to do that for a while. Before leaving the States, we bought skis. Again, I'm from Texas. I had never had much use for winter sporting goods. But the Chimgan Mountains were right there, supposedly world-renowned for skiing. There was little in the way of infrastructure there, and skiing lessons were basically this. An instructor would take a rope, tie it around his waist, give the other end of the rope to the student would tie it around their waist. The student would go down, the instructor would be behind them and act as kind of a brake, a controller, something like that. However, the rope was about 6 feet long at best, so if the student fell, they were run over by the instructor, which I witnessed multiple times on the first day that we ever went to the Chimney Mountains. So I decided I would try teaching myself. Having learned the basics from watching Three's Company as a kid, I decided to forego the tutor and the possibility of being run over by the tutor and stayed off the lift, which was basically a board on a retractable rope that pulled you up the mountain. If the weight wasn't evenly distributed by passengers, you guessed it, the skier couldn't stay on and fell. And of course, because the rope is tied to the middle of the board, you can't straddle the board because then you can't get off when you need to get off. So it either had to hold on for dear life or have two people of very similar weight and skill on either side of that rope. So what I did, I'd walk up as far as I could, put my skis on, and then go down the mountain. I only fell a few times, and thanks to Terry and Janet teaching Jack how to turn, stop, and get back up.
Okay, that's not bad, Jack, really. Good for you. Now lean forward. Now crouch. Now flex.
Now crow like a rooster.
I actually had a really good time. While there, I also learned that garbage bags make great sleds. Uzbek cuisine is not well known throughout the world. But no matter where you traveled in Uzbekistan, you were likely to find plav or osh, which is the same thing, just called different things. Plav, I believe, is the Russian name. Osh is the Uzbek name. This is the national dish of Uzbekistan, and it's kind of a fried rice with bits of mutton, carrots, onions, dates, etc. If it looks like what's on your screen right now, you are overpaying. That is for foreigners. If you're curious what Uzbek food is like, and can't make it there and are close to or planning a trip to Nashville, check out the restaurant Osh, which I believe is off of Thompson Lane. I ate there before a while back. It's very authentic, from the food to the atmosphere. I actually felt like I was back in Tashkent while there, and the owners are Uzbek, and I heard them speaking Russian, I heard them speaking Uzbek on the phone, I heard them speaking English. Word of advice, you'll probably need to add a little bit of salt. Uzbek food is made with many spices, but they don't add a lot of salt, and salt is what unlocks the flavor of some of those spices, so you may need to add a little bit of salt to it. Uzbekistan was not all trials and tribulations. We met some great people, and I was exposed to cultures that I would never have been had I not gone. Whether it was local musicians I worked with while sponsored by Heineken, playing at the Los Amigos Grill inside the Hotel Intercontinental, the diplomats I met at the Sunday brunch at the same hotel, the Peace Corps and UN people that we met. We had weekly bowling nights, Latin dance class taught by a Costa Rican married to the Swiss consul who played percussion and saxophone in my band for a while, game nights, and I hosted Thanksgiving on multiple occasions, inviting Americans who were there without family. The experience, although at times difficult, I wouldn't have traded for anything. Under the new president, Uzbekistan seems to be opening its doors to the world and welcoming more to come visit. But as I stated, it has been several years since I was there last. So if you have any current insights to the political, cultural, or financial state of the country at this time, please let us know your experience in the comments below. This is one of the first places that I've ever lived outside of the United States, and really it actually cemented my desire to see more of the world. So I would not have traded this experience for anything. If you have the desire to go there, this is an ancient land. This is a very tolerant land as far as Muslim lands go. It's very moderate. It's safe for Americans. Well, at the time of the video, it's safe for Americans. With the current administration and some of the things they're doing, I'm not so sure anymore. So yeah, if you know what it's like now, let us know. Remember to subscribe, comment, like, and share the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you down the road.
Let's hit the road.